of Simply Stated Season 4. And I'm going to start out here redoing my makeup so you all can see me put on some makeup and jewelry for fun. And to let you know that this may actually be one of the hardest hitting seasons of Simply Stated that you will ever see. Episodes will not be announced as a schedule. You'll have to catch up with them as they show up on YouTube at WKC, DEBRHKYC as far as why I make this show. It's literally a culmination of events that I've discussed as far as personal events and professional work that I've done and related to labor trafficking issues in the US and throughout the world. And so I hope you like my top. I have pictures every day up, fresh pictures every day up at WKC, DEBRHKY, sorry, that's wrong. DEBRHKY on OnlyFans. YouTube is WKC, and no, you do not get fresh pictures every day. So if you like fun, like whatever type picture, that's all going to be over at OnlyFans. Simply Stated is going to be the harder hitting show. It's definitely considered a news show and not like fun. For some of you, it's going to be incredibly fun because you're someone who works on labor trafficking issues and you're concerned about what's happening. As far as what's going on in the U.S. today, the biggest news today is that the U.S. House finally passed legislation to release the names of the Jeffrey Epstein clients. I have to say it's been a really interesting series of events, and I haven't been lacking in any irritation. I just went through a series of investigations in Traverse City, Elk Rapids, Charlevoix, and Petoskey, and the whole thing just totally sucked. And I have no lack of irritation or annoyance with people afterwards because I went through a number of events where I was assaulted, and I actually have injuries still that I'm recovering from. So my tolerance level is early at 0, but maybe that's the thing, you know, you don't want to be too trusting in this day and age with the way people are behaving. There's been a number of culminating events recently. You saw, of course, that Representative Green decided that she was completely fed up with Donald Trump because he wasn't going to release the names, or she thought he was blocking the release. But they came to the point of insulting her, and she's actually someone who's considered a really well-respected woman in the party and leadership. The Democratic Party just consistently been calling him a pervert and a weirdo because they thought he was not going to let the names be released. He also very seriously injured his own reputation by getting into a fight with the BBC news services, the English news service, for those of you who don't know. The BBC is, I would say pretty much all English news services are fairly well respected, and more so than most in the world, actually. I was trained in the English investigative journalism style and their methods, and that's actually what I follow. I really don't follow anything taught news journalism. And as many of you know, I'm someone who declined to ever want to work at Fox News or CNN because both networks, just as an example, are full of literal gangbangers. There's a few people who work at them that aren't crazy. As detailed in the past, for example, Megyn Kelly literally notoriously lies and claims to have been raped all over the place, and she's actually a labor trafficker. To put it in context, and people at the Pentagon went up to New York and started working underneath her until she was finally fired from the job and was actually physically escorted from the building. She's a really hostile, dangerous person. But she's actually working under another name now, which I need to... Caitlin Collins over at CNN. So she got fired after extensive amount of work that myself and other people put effort into from Fox News, and then decided to go over to CNN. Over the summer, I'm sure you saw some of the antics with her playing games with Carolyn, God, I can't even think of her name. I don't even know if it like matters. Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary. Like, who is that even? And she's so bad. Like, she undermines the president all over the place, and she's supposed to be his press secretary. And then there's the fact that she's playing all these dumb games with Tulsi Gabbard, who, we're going to detail this here. The series of investigations I went through was a part of Occam's Razor, which was was not an approved operation that went through on the west coast of Michigan over the last summer and part of the last year, and even before that. And I'm completely exhausted and frankly angry for having been dragged into it because of my injuries. So I've been in the ER 3 times the last month. I'm dealing with current stalking issues as a journalist here in the U.S., and I'm not actually working as a journalist regularly. I'm someone that just does what used to be called influencing, but what I do is a little more serious than influencing. So Anyways, the series will be detailing the events up in Traverse City, Elk Rapids, Charlevoix, and Petoskey, where a number of terrorism organizations were set up. Traverse City is literally nothing but hate groups. I don't recommend going there for anything. It's a complete waste of your time. Like, very pretty area, not worth the travel. Like, let me do that for you because I already went up there for a while. It's extremely cold. Nothing but weird hate groups. You know, services, like, everything is just really strange there. Like, you can't even get healthcare up there. I mean, unless you're Chinese CCP or Russian FSB, you cannot get healthcare up in Traverse City. I went to a couple clinics there, outpatient clinics, that was okay. But if you needed anything more seriously done beyond outpatient care, you just weren't going to be able to get it there. It was really, really bad. And frankly, there was a group of people that came up. Some had been members of Congress, some of them were working for other U.S. agencies, and we'll detail all that later as much as it needs to be, because some of it really doesn't. But frankly, the Department of Labor, the U.S. military, you know, like the ACLU, everybody came up there to get involved because Megyn Kelly started a big fight with Doug Fleming also running it and started trying to put women into being labor trafficked again. And frankly, there was a number of children up there that were being labor trafficked and prostituted. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that went back to like I haven't seen anything this bad in an area since like the 80s in Dubuque, Iowa. I mean, it was horrible. Hi! Hello to all of you. So, I mean, this was as bad as the stuff I saw back in the 80s in Iowa with the weird crap being put up by Endeavor Corp. I also have to tell you, I'm still really angry with Pam Bondi because she was actually there over the summer and she did nothing to apologize the fact that she allowed me to be hit on the same day she knew I was going to air the information about Patrick Witzel having been the person that, you know, the guy that actually screamed and yelled at me at Luther College back like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. It was 2002, and said I couldn't sing and set up a bunch of trafficking operations. It's really obvious he was relying on MS-13 for Endeavor Corp. That also puts Ari Emanuel in a really bad position too, because Ari is pretty clearly someone who's benefited from the company being set up and made money off of it. It made money off of people not actually being paid for work, and that's actual U.S. citizens in favor of people who were from the Russian FSB, Chinese CCP, El Jalisco, El Tren de Aragua, MS-13. The list of stupid just goes on and on and on. And none of it's over. It still relates to the present day in the U.S. and politics in the U.S. And so as far as current events, let's talk really briefly about Trump's current error with the BBC, which he apparently decided to back up off of. But there's a lot of networks in the U.S. that have bad information and they don't produce good information. So it's really important to accept that the U.S. does not have strong, stable journalism networks. And yet Trump, as far as I know, hasn't made a point of suing them. I mean, there's just an absolute plethora of publications he could sue for errors, and he doesn't. And then the BBC made like one error when they spliced two but I don't even know if it's an error. They spliced two events together, like two comments he made together, and he decided to file for an $8 billion, like $8 billion is a lot of money, $8 billion against them, the BBC. And the BBC just said, we're not paying that and we're not changing our comment, because they didn't actually edit it up. They just sliced two different events together. And what I saw that helped me figure it out and make clarity out of it, because the BBC doesn't really make mistakes like that. Hi, Alejandro. They don't. So here's the thing. They don't normally make mistakes like that. What really showed me what was going on is that I caught some footage from both Fox and CNN Russian FSB members immediately jumping so fast to start criticizing the BBC and saying they owed him money. And that's the kind of crap that the Russian FSB will pull to create obfuscation in a situation. And it's so obvious they do that because they can't get at the BBC like they would like to. So now I know, I mean, you should know, at least from following the shows, hopefully, that it means it was some kind of weird setup where the FSB got one over on the BBC, probably. That's what I'm going to think about it. And no, I don't think the BBC owes money on it. They do need to watch their footage, though, of their network, and make sure that they're not, going to continue to allow those kinds of events to happen. I personally don't think it's a good idea to slice two different comments together, even though it's commonly done in journalism. only because you have to have context so people can understand it doesn't lead to any kind of misrepresentation or confusion. Trump's response was hard to understand in the sense that it looked to be so much about money, because the BBC would have it. Other people he sued haven't had it. As most of you probably ought to realize, a lawsuit is based on a willingness to pay the person having the money and then an actual complaint. And the BBC doesn't think there was an actual complaint, and they don't really owe him one for that. They don't owe him an explanation for any of that. Would I personally splice two comments together like that in that kind of a time span? No. It's too confusing for viewers. That's also why I make a show that's so simplistic. I don't do a bunch of graphics. I don't put a bunch of fancy, spancy side effects in. I just talk to people and tell them what's going on, what I think. And so, as far as what's going on currently, there is a very serious current issue with this administration going ahead with Occam's razor up in Traverse City, because I was up there and so were a number of other individuals, and frankly, Tulsi Gabbard, who's supposed to be our intelligence director, what is she even calling herself anymore? Hold on, I'll get something and find out what her official title is supposed to be. This is probably weird. Let's see. So yeah, the point is, if you're going to go with the situation with the Pam Bondi, I told her years ago. Let's see. Tulsi Gabbard is supposed to be the United States Director of National Intelligence, and she's a complete fucking idiot. There you go. That's what you need to know. She came up to Traverse City to what? To talk to us, to be an asshole. Like, she ran around in her stupid asshole costumes, and she did exactly what Jared Leto said she was going to do. He turned her in like decades ago in Janesville, and said that she was going to try to set more trafficking, and that's exactly what she did. I literally never want to see this person ever again. I am so completely sick of it. I was trying to work a job, and it was just like every weird moron coming through the place being a dork. And that's just literally not cool. It's just not cool at all. I have a right to work a job, to not be harassed, to work at a restaurant, and to not have to worry about labor trafficking. And when a member of the administration shows up there, I look like the hot school teacher that the kids have a crush on. Thank you. It's not acceptable for somebody. Oh, I'm on OnlyFans at Deborah K, DeborahKay. So you're allowed to subscribe there for pictures. So the point about all this is that, and it was horrifying for those of us who were there, she very clearly went ahead and did exactly what Jared Leto had accused her of. Not that Jared Leto is a good guy. He's not. He's a horrible person. Also goes by the name Michael Keating. That's one of his aliases. But she did exactly what he said she was going to do, which is start trying to set up systems to get a bunch of us put back on hoop systems, and that comes out of Booz Allen Hamilton. Remember that her position actually comes from Booz Allen Hamilton and is not a legitimate government position. So I've said both that she's supposed to be a member of the administration, but she's really not. Nothing tied to CACI, Labatt, Accenture, or Booz Allen Hamilton, who are all contractors that were fired earlier this year after like decades of abuse and slavery, is legitimate. They're not legitimate government jobs. They're contractors who have specialized in rape, fraud, extortion, slavery scams here in the U.S. and trafficked U.S. citizens. So, and they spent way too much time putting pressure on me and everybody else to try to go back to being trafficked. I spent a ridiculous number of years of my life working and getting out of that situation. I was frankly a victim of it. But that's what you need to know, is that literally a huge number of people went back to being threatened up there. Kids were being trafficked all over the place. There was problems with the Chinese CCP. There was problems with the MS-13 gang. There was problems with Nicaragua. Jalisco, I realized in the process of it all, pretty clearly set the situation up to get the invasion on Hamilton at one point. No, they just set the whole thing up to, it just ended up being this weird gang fight, basically, and the rest of us just wanted to leave. And the majority of people were just struggling to not get caught up in their stupid fight and not have to stay. And so a lot of what this season will actually detail is specific events. We'll go through direct issues. And there's still the unanswered question of why exactly I'm expected to deal with any of this. Because I had gone to the U.S. government years ago and said, I don't want to go up there for all that. I don't want to go up there to be beat on, and I don't want to go up there to put up with any of it. You know, I have a right to move on and make a decent living and not be dragged into weird stuff. You know, I'm somebody that was supposed to have been able to go to work as a doctor in the U.S. or at least a nursing assistant. You know, we live in a country where the United States, for those of you who aren't aware, is a country where women are expected to have employment and to support ourselves. And it is completely ridiculous to create a situation where anybody, I mean, especially somebody who's in a government job, would dare try to either oppress any of us from working or two, try to have a hoop system put back on us. It isn't even kind of serious. And the reality about Tulsi is that she's very much somebody that benefited from Jeffrey Epstein and his operations. I had to think for a long time, do I want to go ahead and just release the names of people that I have, or, you know, do I want to just drop it? And I thought, well, you know, I had a number of talks with other victims and survivors back in 2024 up in Diversity and what was happening. And, you know, when you have so many international organizations involved, and even whether it's Department of Defense or it's South Korea or representatives from India coming over, you know, people came from YouTube, TMZ was there. It really was I mean, Traverse City really is a place that's just full of Hollywood trash. Like, it's literally everywhere dumb gangbanger comes through there. It just totally sucks. And it's a place to just go and work at if you have to and leave. But I'm just very frustrated because I had told people that I was friends with that I didn't want to go up there and have to deal with all that. And people just didn't listen. You know, whatever I said just didn't seem to matter. And it's really scary to go through a situation where there's that much, like, labor trafficking going on. And the rest of us don't know, you know, if we're going to make it. You know, a lot of us did, but, you know. So we'll go through the rest of the series. I'll just like to detail events, kind of read them off to you. I don't think the series needs to be like really long, but it's important that it gets made. Hopefully, you know, the Senate like moves on and actually very quickly passes legislation to like what, release the rest of the Epstein names. I mean, I think the real issue for the rest of us is that Jeffrey Epstein was killed in prison, and that was in order to protect a number of other people, and Patrick Witzel is one of those. But I think you're going to find out that so is Ari Emanuel, and you're going to find a number of Republicans too. Michael Kroll would be one of them, Michael Swanberg. But I went through some really serious, nasty torture and abuse in Arlington, Virginia for a number of years. And I went through a lot before that. And the people involved aren't in prison. You know, Jeffrey Epstein's dead, but I never dealt with Jeffrey Epstein. I only knew the other people involved that got away with it were clients of his, and that they used those contractors. You know, Frederick Steiner, like another one, he's in prison. The guy you knew is David Barnes, who's also the actor Chris Evans, belongs in prison. There's terrorist attacks tied to these events. There's massive murders involved. Like, why aren't the dorks in prison? If not in the U.S., somewhere else. Because they can't be free. By the way, the one complaint I have is I'm looking at the news, and it's supposed to look like all these weird criminals are being deported and, like, what, taken out of the U.S. or, I mean, what is even going on? Like, what, you've decided to clear out all the dorks that rape and beat up people for J-Lo so she can have another dress? Well, that's cool. I mean, that's progress, right? That's something everybody needs. No, we actually need it as a country. People need to be allowed to go to work and not be worried that some dork gangbanger is going to come in and clean out their store or attack them because J-Lo wants another free dress. This thing with the Academy Awards, you know, even continue to be aired is completely bizarre. It's just like this weird list of perverts. Apparently Seth Meyers and the FCC is moving along with President Trump to shut down Seth Meyers. Great. Seth Meyers tried to catch up with me in Petoskey, and it was a really dangerous situation. I ended up walking out of it. But I have gone through nothing short of bizarre stalking. I think it's beyond even harassment now, with people from the labor trafficking scene now, the Russian FSB, that are part of the Hollywood circuit trying to bother me. And if they're bothering me and stalking me, and I'm a regular person, then how many other people are being harassed these days? And so literally I'm saying to you, whatever's going on, you know, if the U.S. government really wants to solve the situation, I don't care whether it's Trump or the Democrats or all of them, because this show is for everybody. You got to move on and actually arrest these people at the higher levels. They can't stay free in the U.S. And By the way, one of the reasons I really don't like Karen Levitt is she keeps putting out dumb shows about how she's got Trump going to Endeavor events. Well, nobody's going to trust Trump if he's attending events put on by a massive labor trafficking organization that has hate crimes all over it and illegal immigrants running it that are dumb, thuggy weirdos who won't pay for anything and beat the shit out of people. I mean, come on now. So, you know, as far as making a show, I love to be grateful for what I have in my own life and personally, and that's something I get to express in OnlyFans, but in order to get some changes made and to restore the American economy truly, you know, I don't care which political party does it or if it's both or none. These people have to prison. They just simply can't stay free in the U.S. Or, you know, do you want to bring back the death penalty? Like, I don't get to make that decision. I just know that you can't have complete psychotics just roaming around Traverse City, Elk Rapids, you know, and they're coming into the airport. Like, while I was there, I talked to Border Patrol. They said there was a problem with them coming straight in from Chicago on the boats. So they would literally go, like, right up Lake Michigan or City and just start trying to traffic people and start fights. And I didn't see any evidence that they were getting deported or thrown out. And I mean, I saw no evidence of anything being better. I only saw the situation getting worse before I left the area in late summer. And frankly, it was like September before I finally got away from the West Coast. Like, it was probably actually all the point of October. And frankly, I mean, even now I'm still exhausted. Like, I had to take time to kind of get myself reorganized, like mentally, to even make Simply Stated. And so the point is that you know, there's a lot of good content material out there. The world of independent influencers to replace what we've dealt with Hollywood and their bizarre schemes with putting in Russian FSB and Chinese CCP members has finally changed, right? Like, that's finally being disrupted. That's good. But the reality is, if I've gone through this many attacks and assaults, then other people have to be as well. And the reality is that most of us don't depend on these kinds of shows to make a living. They're literally passion projects, or what you would call an ontological purpose project. So I'm going to go through into the shows in detail at all as much. It was asked that a name of at least, well, I'm not going to do one. I had promised at least one on Survivor like 2 years ago that I put together a full list of names for the people I knew of. And you have to understand that those names may not be the ones the government would have because these are aliases most of the time. But I've definitely got a list to release myself. And I made the decision that just, we're always tired of waiting on Congress. Frankly, the only way to get results in the situation was just put more pressure on everybody. And as you've noted, like, the Republican Party started to pull away from Trump because they didn't think he was going to support getting the list released. There was also the issues with I don't know how to say this. I think you're really looking at a number of people, whether they're in Congress or in the White House, that are just scared. Because Epstein's network did nothing but hire independent military contractors, which is those companies that are named, to assault, attack anyone who would say anything to not support them. They fully support slavery and raping and killing people. And I unfortunately came to the conclusion that Trump himself was too worried about his own safety versus the rest of us, which isn't actually acceptable to have a U.S. president. I mean, follow your own security, take care of yourself. Like, you know, don't go walking around late at night, stuff like that. But it isn't okay to try to be a world leader or even a member of Congress who wouldn't do anything about abject slavery in this country. And I mean, I'm in my mid-40s and I've never received any kind of payment for everything I went through. And I'm owed money for work. And I'm also worse, owed money now. I'm owed around $400 for work, and the Department of Labor in Michigan can't figure out how to get it to me because they're being hacked by some weird dork that I ended up having to report all over the place. He's from the Russian FSB. And he's the same dork that worked for Booz Allen Hamilton and CACI, and he specializes in harassing and bothering victims of whatever. I mean, I started out as a victim when I was like 5. I was taken from my mom. And My mom was eventually murdered when I was 21 years old. So I had to deal with the company Booz Allen Hamilton covering up the murders and everything else and breaking into the systems of Florida and also the federal government to erase evidence, which they've done consistently. And I've been a victim of multiple rapes and consistently reported and done what I was supposed to. And frankly, had to go through a long process of just changing my whole life pattern and how I did things and see what actually does work. I think rape swab kits are completely useless because every lab in this country can be hacked, and I don't actually have to put up with having a rape swab kit done if it's not going to be effective. You know, if you're just going to let some dork guy from Booz Allen Hamilton go around raping people, and this is who Jeffrey Epstein actually developed, right? Like, because he developed those technologies for Booz Allen Hamilton, and the other countries adopted them. CACI, Robotics, I'm sure all adopted those. And it's not to say there haven't been developments to stop some of it. That was important in helping Space Force because people finally realized that since a number of us stood up and said something about it, that actual space equipment was being used to like stalk people, to stalk humans in this country. So yeah, the whole thing's just become totally ridiculous. I'm in my mid-40s and haven't received restitution for work, and the people who are frankly responsible aren't in prison where they're supposed to be. And unfortunately, going back all the way to 2012, I can tell you that Tulsi Gabbard's one in this administration who's directly responsible for that, for keeping them out of prison. And they belong in prison. And she's particularly working for the Russian government. And Christopher Wray is still free, and he's Chinese CCP. He was up in Traverse City. He had the nerve to try to get into it, try to fight with me, try to hit me. I just walked off. But he's, you know, we have some really nasty gangsters that are free in this country that are frankly illegal immigrants, and I'm going to say Tulsi Gabbard and Christopher Wray are another pair. And it's time for something to really seriously change. We can't just keep making excuses and letting people who are this psychotic and weird maintain any kind of position of power. They have to be treated like what they are, which is frankly psych patients at best that belong in a locked ward. So I'm completely like fed up, and maybe that's all this season 4 Simply Stage is going to be called, is I'm fed up and tired and injured, because I had had the hope of being a nurse back in my 30s, and that was completely ruined for me because of gang activity. And frankly, Donald Trump's people were in power at the time, and I wasn't able to keep my housing, and I wasn't able to finish my program because of gang activity and violence at Georgetown University and Marymount University in the DC area. And nobody's ever apologized, nobody's ever offered restitution. Like, there's literally been nothing ever offered to me, not even an apology. So I'm saying is we see a lot of, you know, as Americans and American citizens in this world, we see a lot of media coverage that claims that the problem is being resolved. But when I see the same weird gangbangers that have always gotten away with labor trafficking and abusing people free in Michigan, being violent and committing violent acts, and they report the police and nothing's done and they're still free, it's really hard to believe the news coverage that says anything has been done. I would personally say, I think right now, I'm pretty sure ICE could do a much more serious job of getting illegal aliens and throwing them out. And I 100% realize that the actual Americans of this country, US citizens, would be more than happy to be thrown out. They wouldn't get mad at you for removing them. Any news coverage that try to claim they didn't like it is actually wrong. It's regularly Russian FSB or Chinese CCP based material. So that's why I put the show together. Yes, more Simply Say is coming. I heard more than enough complaints from people of the dumb labor tracking groups and diversity and hate groups complaining about how they didn't the show. It's like, well, I don't care. We have to have some accurate news coverage in this country and some actual investigative reporting, and there has to be some actual recounts of what's really going on. And as far as I'm concerned, the Senate better get off their butt and pass that legislation to release the Epstein names. But you better be well aware that the rest of us are going to keep on this until the rest of the dorks go to prison or are executed. Like, the problem is officially over, whichever way it has to be. Whether they're pent up in psychiatric wards or put in prison, or you bring back the death sentence, in whatever the capacity or proximity state they're in, like whatever you want to call it. But the problem has to go away permanently. Good night. This has been the first episode of Simply Stayed Season 4.